Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. You know, if you had a friend, and he's 24 years old, and let's say he just got into bullfighting, right? He's a matador. And let's say that both of you were aware of other matadors who've had health problems. And let's say the matador business paid well. There was a potential for your friend to make millions of dollars. And let's say your friend was very good at what he did. In other words, he was a young up-and-coming matador. You recognize, looking at the matador community, that he was actually a future star. He had a lot of game. But let's say he comes to you one day, after about a year of being a matador, after showing the promise, right? You knew coming up in college, let's say there was a bullfighting league in college. You knew coming up that this guy was a star in college. Now the guy is in the pro matador ranks, and he comes to you after a year and he says, you know what? This is dangerous. You know what? Now that I'm up close in the sport, now that I'm a part of the sport, now that I'm seeing what being a pro is all about, this is not for me. Because if the wrong bull hits me the wrong way, if I have an off night and get the kind of injury that some of the superstars have had in this profession, that might affect my quality of life forever, right? I might never be the same again. That's too much of a risk. I'd rather spend time with my kids or my girl or my family, my parents, my nieces and nephews, my grandparents, right? That's more important to me than this, right? And we'll say that this also includes this phone call coming in. Just ignore it. Well, my point to you is that's what's happening right now with Chris Borland in the NFL. Now, if you're the kind of person who would tell your matador friend, buddy, live your life on your terms, right? Your sport is dangerous. People have been injured, right? If you want to walk away, your life is yours. You do it on your terms, your way. You have my support. And that's what people need to do with Chris Borland. Now, let me tell you, I'm in the Bay Area. I watch the 49ers. Dare I say, I even talk with 49er fans, right? They're all around me. The Niners are a bit of a cult, right? You talk with a 49er fan for longer than 2 minutes, and I'm telling you, you're going to hear one of the following things. Joe Montana, The Catch, Ronnie Lott, Jerry Rice, Bill Walsh, right? It's a religion here. People act like that catch happened last week, not in the early 1980s, right? Now, Chris Borland, who only played 1 year, was clearly the heir apparent to Patrick Willis. This guy was one of the leading tacklers on the team. This guy was what they call a high motor guy. He was always around the football, right? He reminded me personally of a young Ray Lewis, right? He was a little bit undersized, but you understood that this was a first-round talent, right? You understood that he made up for the lack of size with added intensity, right? You understood that he held himself to a very high standard. He was a playmaker. He was a difference maker. But early on, if you read the Borland reports, early on, when he was at 49er camp, right, he sensed that the game carried much more risk than he anticipated. right? He understood that whether he was good or not, and he was very good, but whether he was good or not, right, he understood that the risk was excessive. That if he started showing symptoms, this is a guy involved in a lot of tackles, if he started showing symptoms of CTE, it would already be too late. He also realized that there were players in their 20s at different levels of football whose brain scans showed CTE, right? The kind of progressive brain injury that affects your quality of life down the road. He didn't want that risk. He's walking away from the sport. I applaud him. Now, I'm someone who enjoys NFL football. I do. I'll continue to watch NFL football. But understand, we all need to know the risks, to assume the risks, right? We shouldn't pretend that the risk isn't great, that many of these guys aren't going to be having major problems after they retire, right? You know, as we watch the game, let's all accept some responsibility. Let's all accept some culpability over the fact that a great player like an Earl Campbell can't climb a flight of stairs today on his own without help, right? Let's accept the fact that a great like Tony Dorsett, right, now has recurring memory loss, right, has signs of CTE, right? Let's accept the fact that there is great risk in playing football. As I mentioned the idea of a bullfighting college league earlier in this video, I'm sure many of you thought to yourself, come on, bullfighting is too dangerous to have a league involving college students. But yet we do with football, don't we? Right? Knowing that literally dozens of brain scans for older football players show chronic brain injury, right? Degenerative brain injury. Knowing that the league itself has now admitted that repetitive head trauma, such as the head trauma you experience in football, can lead to major health problems down the road, right? We're now finding out that head trauma is also related to ALS. We also know that the incidence of things like phone calls in the background here, right, as well as head trauma are much greater in the NFL than in greater society, right? So to Chris Borland, let me just say, I've enjoyed watching you play. I thought you were a future all-pro player. I completely appreciated and respected your talent. I also completely appreciate and respect your decision to walk away from the sport, right? We openly talk about the dangers of boxing. We openly talk about punch-drunk syndrome. It's time we openly talk about the dangers of playing pro football, right? The incidence, the higher incidence of brain injury in the sport, right? I hope more football players think long and hard about how long they want to stay in the game, right? I personally am surprised that a lot of these guys continue playing. For example, Peyton Manning, after suffering major injury on the field, right after they've achieved some level of financial security that they can live with, right? I believe that, as Terry Crews believes, that the NFL is a bit of a cult, right? That somehow we don't view it as a regular job. Could you imagine going to an office every day and then finding out that people in the office have long-term injuries that are work-related? And could you imagine just looking the other way, feeling like you would let everyone down if you didn't at least get yourself checked out and think about an early retirement to avoid having that happen to you. Well, that's the football culture we have now. Right? That's the football culture. Understand, the league acknowledging the health problems is a recent development. Right? So let's look at this Chris Borland story. Let's look at the fallout from it. Let's see if more players don't say, hey, you know what? The league played it at many different levels, pee-wee, high school, college, pro. I've gotten enough of a taste. I have 6 figures, 7 figures in my bank account. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity. I'm now retiring. Right? More players need to do that. A few years ago, we were astonished when Ricky Williams tried to retire in his 20s. Right? I believe we need to prepare ourselves, given the public acknowledgement of the health risk involved, for more Chris Borlands. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for stopping by.